G'day, I'm Paul. I'm a big fan of the Mitsubishi Outlander, but always thought it just lacked a little bit of punch. Well, they're hoping to address it with this, which is the Outlander plug-in hybrid EV. This actually has a massive cult following here in Australia for some reason, so the people that buy these absolutely love them. I want to see if this version kind of mimics what the original one did, but adds to it with all the new stuff that they've fitted to the Outlander. This one here is the top specification, well, one down from the top specification, called the Exceed. It's priced at just under $66,000. The top spec is the Exceed Tourer with a couple of other bells and whistles. If that's too expensive, the entire plug-in hybrid range of the Outlander kicks off at just under 55 grand. Now, this competes with things like the Ford Escape PHEV and also the MG HS PHEV. But outside of that, there really aren't too many plug-in hybrid competitors in this price bracket. The rest of them are hybrids, so it is kind of unique in that sense. Today we're going to do a detailed review of this car, so if you do want to skip ahead to other parts of the review, you can use the time codes on the screen, or if you're on YouTube, you can scroll down and use the chapters below, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon. That way you'll find out every single time we review a very red car. Now let's talk about design. Actually, before we do that, why are we inside our lab? We actually shot our SUV size comparison video in this exact spot because it was bucketing down outside. Today it's a different problem. It is so windy that our microphone was like exploding, so that's why we're in here. Now, in terms of the design, you have 9 exterior colors to pick from. All but white is going to cost you either roughly $750 or just under $1,000, depending on which color you want to go for. Look, I reckon this is a good looking car. We recently checked out the Nissan X-Trail, which this shares a platform with, but you can't really tell that they're the same car beneath the skin because they look totally different to each other. So with the Outlander here, you have this giant grille, but only part of it is actually real. This is all sort of closed off up the top here. These sections here are open, and so is the bottom as well. You can see a radar built into there, big Mitsubishi logo, and a camera there for the 360 camera. Now, this design kind of carries over to what they have on Pajero Sport and also Triton. That means these chrome elements that kind of sweep under that top section of light all the way down to the bottom here. And this car's a little bit different to some other cars on the road because this top section is only for your LED daytime running light and indicator, whereas this bottom section down here is for your headlights, the high beam as well. These are really good headlights. I was driving in the country the other night and the projection is incredible. It comes with matrix LED function as well, so pretty comprehensive setup there. Now let's whip around to the side here. You've got yourself a set of 20-inch alloy wheels, so it's got that machined finish on the outside with piano black on the inside. Fairly low profile tyre. Some people have complained about the ride on the Outlander. I didn't hate it all that much, but this car will be significantly heavier because it's carrying a big battery for the plug-in hybrid system, so I'll be interested to see how that affects the ride and whether that's going to make this an uncomfortable car to drive in. Ground clearance is a little over 200 millimetres. You've got these wheel arch protectors here, you know, just in case you do any off-roading. This was actually in a recent medium SUV off-road test that we did, and you can watch that by clicking up there. That didn't have the plug-in hybrid EV, it just had the standard Outlander, so we'll have to repeat the test in the plug-in, but you can see how it performs on a light off-road course. Over here, you have a litany of plug-in hybrid badges. So you've got this one here that reads plug-in hybrid EV. You've got the same badge on the other side and then another badge like that on the rear as well. Camera here in the wing mirror with an indicator built into there. I like this black section that divides the body colors. You can actually get, I think just on the Exceed Tourer, the black colored roof as well, or an offset color, so it kind of gives it a bit of unique character. Roof rails over here. This car gets a panoramic sunroof. You've also got privacy glass, and then come around to the back. You've got LED taillights. Well, for the most part, these sections here are incandescent, so you won't get the effects of the LED on that. There's your other PHEV badge with Exceed for that model. Outlander down the bottom there as well. Now, what do you think about the design? They've kind of hidden all of the exhaust outlets and stuff like that on this, trying to keep that sort of green image. Do you like the look of the Outlander? Do you think that the plug-in hybrid is going to be the way to go in the Outlander range? And are you a current Outlander PHEV owner? I'm keen to get your feedback. Let me know in the comments section below. So we are inside the Outlander PHEV. We'll start off with the key. So you've got the Mitsubishi logo up the top. Lock, unlock, boot. nothing on the back there. This is a proximity sensing key. So once you're inside, you have a push button start there. Now, on first inspection, nothing actually looks all that different between this and the standard Outlander that isn't a plug-in hybrid. And the only real differences are a couple of, or one extra drive mode here and then a couple of extra buttons here. Outside of that, this all appears the same. And look, to me, that's a good thing because it is nice materials here along the dashboard. It all looks and feels nice and premium. And when you're talking about the money that Mitsubishi wants you to spend on this, it is really getting up there. It's close to $70,000. So you really do want to feel like you're getting value for money. I don't love all of this piano black down here. That marks really easily. And the second, you get one scratch on it, it's there for life pretty much. So that is a little bit annoying. But outside of that, touch points. So that's not too bad there on the armrest, and it's good there on the door as well. How soft are they? Well, we've got our durometer. We've tested the main surfaces in this cabin if you want to see how this car compares to others that we've tested before. Have a look at the link in the description below. What about your build quality? Oh, that's fairly wonky in the center there, which isn't great, but the rest of this feels pretty good. And our door test. Sounds nice and solid. Let's talk about infotainment. So up the top here, you have a 9-inch infotainment system. And so it's a color touchscreen. You've got shortcut buttons down the bottom here. Then ahead of the driver, you have a 12.3-inch display that I'll run you through shortly. Now, on this screen here, you have inbuilt satellite navigation that's native to that operating system. Works pretty well, no real sort of dramas there. In addition to all the regular stuff you have fitted to that infotainment system, you've also got sections here for your EV settings. So it shows you how much range we have left in the battery and how much range you have combined with the battery and fuel in the tank. Then in addition to that, you have a subsequent EV menu here that gives you indications of where you can find charging stations. You can set your charging timer and also charge settings as well, plus all of those features that relate to vehicle to home, vehicle to grid, that type of thing. So that is where you're able to make all of those changes. On the radio front, you have AM, FM, DAB plus digital radio, and it's all plumbed through a 9-speaker Bose branded sound system. Look, the sound system's okay. I found it lacked a bit of bass, even with it turned up all the way. It kind of just was a bit meh. So yeah, I think that could be just a tiny bit better. Smartphone mirroring comes in the form of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. I'll show you what Apple CarPlay looks like first. So full screen integration, it's wireless. I used this on a long drive recently and all worked nicely. So no dropouts, which I found with Hyundai products does my absolute head in, so that is good. Android Auto, I'll show you what that looks like. So unlike CarPlay, which is wireless, Android Auto is wired, but all pretty straightforward and works quite well. Now, ahead of the driver, this 12.3-inch display, I'll run you through what you can see on the screen here. You have a lot of customizability there. You can switch between different menus in the center of the screen and have this sort of supersized display. But then what you can also do is change the display so that you have a more traditional layout with gauge there effectively for the EV system as well. So yeah, it's not a bad setup and the screen's really nice and clear. Now moving on to safety tech. So you've got autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection. You've got an auto dimming rear vision mirror, blind spot monitor built into that wing mirror. You've got rear cross traffic alert. You have radar cruise control. The only sort of thing with this whole system is it has a lane departure warning and a lane keeping assistant, but it doesn't have a semi-autonomous steering function. So we will test that out later to see what it's like, but it is a little short on some of the competitors in this segment that come with that technology. On the parking front, you have both front and rear parking sensors and a 360 camera, and this is what the camera looks like. So the quality is actually pretty good. So you can see clearly out the front there, you've got guidelines that move with the steering wheel, and then as required, you can also change the angles as well. So there's our front tyre. And I think the quality of that is pretty good. In terms of the rear view, let me flick this on so we can see out the back. There it is there. So you can pretty clearly see the suitcase. The quality of that is fantastic. Moving on to practicality, and we'll start off with your connectivity. So you've got a USB-C outlet along with a USB-A outlet. You've got a 12-volt outlet just there. You also have wireless phone charging. Where are you going to put your phone? So it can live down there on the wireless charging pad, or alternatively, you can whack it in the cup holders should you require that. Coffee cup goes into there without any dramas, so it comes out nicely. Let's see if our water bottles fit into there as well. Yep, all good there. Fit into the door too. We'll try the big one as well. Big one doesn't fit into there, but it does fit inside the door, good news. Additional storage, you've got this center console here. It's pretty small, I reckon that could be just a tiny bit bigger. Down here you've got a little bit of storage on both sides. You've got a glove box down here, which is pretty reasonably sized. And finally, you have a sunglasses holder up the top. And what about your comfort? You've got dual zone automatic climate control. You have a third zone of climate control for your second and third rows. You've got heated seats for the front row. The seats themselves are really good, so they hug you in nicely, but you've got this sort of nice sort of diamond quilted finish on them. They are electrically adjustable with memory for both the driver and front passenger, so you can go forwards, backwards. Backrest can go forwards, backwards. You can lift the front, you can lift the back as well. In addition to that, you have lumbar support, and if you go for the Exceed Tourer, you actually get massage seats as well, which is pretty fancy. On our reach test, all of this stuff is easy to reach while you're driving, and the steering is adjustable both for tilt and reach. So, second row of the Outlander. So, knee room, excellent. Toe room, good, but not amazing. Headroom, not too bad. So you'll notice here with this roof that it kind of tapers in a bit there at the top, so you do get that headroom that you need, which is pretty good. Now, in terms of your creature comforts, you've got air vents here. This is where your third zone of climate is. Got another 2 sets of USB ports. One is a USB-A, one is a USB-C. Now, down at the bottom here, there's something interesting. So it's a 1500 watt power outlet. There's one here and also one in the boot. This is where you get your vehicle to load functionality. So you can run appliances off that go up to 1500 watts, which is pretty good. Not quite 3600 watts, which is what you get in some of the EVs, like the EV6 and the Ioniq 5, but still pretty good nonetheless. Map pockets down here, plus additional storage pockets up the top. You can see here that the seats have a similar design to the front there with that diamond quilting. These also both move forward to give you more room in the third row, plus more luggage space as well if you need it. You don't have a traditional center armrest here. It kind of folds like this, and that then gives you access to an armrest and also a pair of cup holders. This also fits inside the door without too many dramas. You've got some privacy blinds here. You can whack those up if you want to. Now our window test. Let's see how this works. Oh, that's really not very good. It doesn't go all the way down. In addition to that, you've got 2 ISOFIX points on the 2 outboard seats and then 3 top tether points here as well. Now, I don't want to break with tradition being a 3-row SUV. I need to see if I can fit in the back. This one's interesting though, and I'll explain why. So, if I drop this down, you can see here that there is literally no legroom there at all. Like, you can't even fit a child in there when this is in its standard setting. So you do have to slide this seat forward. Now, when that's all the way forward, you do actually have a little bit of space. So I'm going to climb in. This space is obviously just for adults, and as you can tell, it is tricky. I'm sorry, when I say adults, this space is only for kids. Obviously not just for adults. When I bring this back a little bit, you'll see what I mean. So I don't have any headroom here. My head is literally on an angle there to fit. And if you have a look ahead there, there is just no leg room there either. So ultimately, yeah, this space is just for kids, and even then it's just occasional use for kids, which is fine because you're not going to buy something this size to take adults around. If you do need to have an adult in here for a very short trip, it'll be fine, but it is just worth keeping in mind that once the kids grow a little bit older, they're going to struggle to actually fit in the back here. But the fact you can actually have 7 seats here in a plug-in hybrid with all these batteries and stuff is pretty impressive. Now, what about your cargo space? Being a 3-row SUV, it's probably not great. Let's have a look here. So you've got a little under 200 litres of cargo space available here. Beneath the cargo floor is a tyre repair kit. Let's have a look at how that fits in. That's actually not too bad. I think we can... There you go, you can actually fit a suitcase plus a laptop bag there, which is pretty good. You sometimes can't do that with a 3-row SUV. This is quite a clever method of getting rid of this as well. So you can just drop this so it's out of the way like that. That gives you a little bit more space. Or alternatively, you can make it a flat load floor by dropping that down like that, which is really cool. So you also have a little sort of hole here for the cargo blind, so that can stay out of the way when you have the 3rd row in place. This is also where you'll find that other AC outlet for making coffees or drinks or whatever. So with the 3rd row tucked away, you have just under 500 litres up to the top of that 2nd row. I'll show you what it looks like with the bags in there when that row is down. There you go, stacks of room in there. You can expand that space even further by pulling these levers, And then that expands to a little under 1,500 litres of space. So it is actually pretty practical for a plug-in hybrid SUV. Now, before we go for a drive, I'll run you through the charging. So it's on this side here. There's a big old flap there because you actually have two different charge types. So you have single phase AC at up to 3.7 kilowatts. And then you have DC, and it's in the form of the CHAdeMO plug. Now, this is pretty uncommon here in Australia. It is the standard in Japan. But the whole reason this exists is because this plug here allows you to do bidirectional electricity flow effectively. This allows you to do vehicle to grid and vehicle to home. What that means is that if you do buy a certain specific wall box that you can get at home, basically plug your car up to that, and it allows you to export up to 10 kilowatts of energy through to a home or to a grid. And that makes this car kind of the sustainable option if you want to live off the grid, because you can charge it off your solar during the day and then use the car to run the home at night time, given it has a 20 kilowatt hour battery. So I think it is a pretty sort of impressive setup there, and really makes it unique in this segment because nothing else in this segment offers this type of infrastructure. Now, the other thing to keep in mind as well, driving range of about 80-ish kilometres depending on the cycle. So the 20 kilowatt hour battery will actually give you that decent driving range for day-to-day use. So I've just hit the road in the Outlander PHEV. Now, before I get on to the driving and stuff like that, I thought I'd mention that I actually drove this car back from the launch, which was in Adelaide. Drove it to Melbourne. If you're not familiar with that distance, it's about 800 kilometres is what I ended up doing, with a little bit of a detour that I took as well. So I've had a fair bit of time behind the wheel of this on the highway and in and around the city as well. So I'm looking forward to sharing all of that with you. Under the bonnet here is a really sort of complex setup, but it's a setup that I think works really well in this plug-in hybrid space. So you have a naturally aspirated 2.4 litre petrol engine. That on its own makes just under 100 kilowatts of power and just under 200 newton meters of torque. So that is a pretty sort of healthy number to begin with. That's then mated with an electric motor on the front axle and then an electric motor on the rear axle. So there is no drive line that runs down the center of the car. They actually use a lot of that space for the battery pack, which has grown in size now to 20 kilowatt hours. Now the front motor, 85 kilowatts of power, 255 newton meters of torque, while the rear motor is 100 kilowatts of power and 195 newton meters of torque. Now that all combines to give you a combined output of 185 kilowatts of power and 450 newton meters of torque. I know I've thrown a whole stack of numbers there at you, but the reason I think this is a really good setup is they've ditched a standard transmission. So in some plug-in hybrids, they use a regular transmission with stepped gears, and I just hate that setup because you just feel the gears changing as you're moving along on electric power. They actually use a single-speed transaxle, and that's attached to the front. And that's able to basically interact with not only the electric motor on the front axle, but also the internal combustion engine. And depending on the speed that the car's doing, it's either using the internal combustion engine as a generator, or at higher speeds, when the engine speed matches the wheel speed, can actually directly drive the wheels as well. In addition to that, it's also able to charge the battery and also supply extra voltage when you do need a power boost when you're under full throttle. So really interesting setup, and in practice it works really well. So right now we have 30 kilometers of range left on the battery, but we are able to just drive along on EV mode only. I can progressively feed in the throttle, and we're really not seeing that internal combustion engine kick on at all until far later down the track. You have EV modes here, so you can go from normal to EV. EV is where it is just driving the wheels through electric motors. So I can basically go all the way to the floor there on that, and it's not until I hit the kick down switch that we get the internal combustion engine come on as well briefly to give us that voltage boost. You can then put it into save mode, which runs the internal combustion engine and means you don't use the battery. And then you can also run it in charge mode, which just charges the battery using the internal combustion engine as a generator. So plenty of cool modes there to play with. Another one here is the single pedal driving mode. Now they call it some other nonsense, but effectively it mimics what the Nissan Leaf has, Tesla, that kind of thing. The only problem is, if I roll out of the throttle now, you can see it goes into that deep charge mode. We get to about 20 k's an hour and then it just goes, oh, it's entirely up to you now to manage the rest. So you then have to take over and come to a full stop. So I would much prefer single pedal driving mode to just be single pedal driving mode. Now, in addition to that single pedal driving button, you can actually use the paddles to roll through different regen modes all the way up to B5 there. So it will go into a deep regen as it comes to a stop. So you have a little bit of flexibility. Another thing that's a little odd with this combination is it actually has a towing capacity. So you can tow 1,600 kilos with a brake trailer. And And that means that you are able to use this as a daily vehicle if required. It is worth keeping in mind though that it does weigh a little over 2,100 kilos, so you will really be feeling a lot of that weight if you do tow 1,600 kilos, have a full complement of people in the car, and obviously are lugging around the battery and all the other components. Now, what does that all mean in terms of your fuel economy? So look, PHEVs always have this outrageous claim for fuel economy of under 2 litres per 100 k's, and it's the same story here with the Outlander. But in practice, once you do actually run the battery entirely dry, you are using this as a hybrid. And as a hybrid, it's actually quite efficient. So after my 800 kilometre drive, I ended up with a combined fuel economy of 6.7 litres per 100 k's, which I thought was pretty impressive for what is predominantly 110, 100 kilometre an hour driving roads. And then in and around the city, you're also going to benefit from being able to plumb some juice back into the batteries, which you can't really do when you are travelling on the highway. And then in terms of your average economy for the battery, they claim a number of 23 kilowatt hours per 100 k's. Let's have a look at our number there. We ended up coming in at 24.3 over a distance of 900 kilometres. So pretty impressive there, I reckon. Now, what about your drive modes? You have a litany of them to choose from here. You've got eco, normal, some off-road modes there as well. Tarmac mode, which is kind of the sport mode, and then you have the high power mode. So the high power mode and tarmac mode will basically put this into its fastest setting in terms of how quickly it accelerates. It will use maximum thrust from the electric motors and the internal combustion engine as well. Might as well flick over to tarmac now. We'll go for a little punt. It's kicked on the internal combustion engine. Jesus, it actually hauls along really nicely there. So punt it through here. This is really impressive. I wasn't expecting this to be as darty as it is. The other interesting thing I'm feeling here as well, and something Mitsubishi's quite proud of, is the super active wheel control, I think is what it's called. Basically technology they mastered with the Evolution cars and Rally, and have now rolled it out to vehicles like this. And what you're able to do is jump over to this setting, and you can see there as I'm punting through these corners, it's able to individually control wheel speed using a braking torque vectoring setup. And as we roll around these corners and I apply throttle, you can actually feel it shoving torque around where it needs to go. It's actually not a bad setup. We'll roll onto the back straight. I'm actually surprised how quick this is. It's moving. You can hear our antenna for the V-Box there whistling along. Wow, that is actually... I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, the Outlander typically is a little bit slow and not that interesting. This, on the other hand, is kind of ridiculous. That was awesome. Now let's do our 0 to 100 runs. So Mitsubishi claims a time of 8.2 seconds. It's actually become faster than the previous generation, so you achieve that in the high power setting. We'll give this a shot. We'll see what happens. Here we go. Run it through to 120 so we can get our overtaking figure. It's tapering off a lot there after 100 k's an hour. All right, I'll bring this to a stop. Oh wow, that's impressive. So we exceeded the manufacturer claim, 7.9 seconds for 0 to 100, and then 7.3 seconds for 80 to 120, which is interesting because it kind of tells us that 0 to 100 is where they've focused everything, and then 80 to 120 it kind of tapers off. And that's what I noticed when I was driving that long distance. When I was going to overtake from 100 k's an hour, I actually needed a really decent run up, and it was a little confusing because at low speed it has so much punch and it moves along, but then as the speed picks up, you really don't have all that much punch, and for overtaking it becomes a concern. And that's why I'm saying that if you're towing 1,600 kilos with a family on board and you need to overtake, this is really going to struggle above 100 k's an hour. So yeah, some really interesting numbers there. Okay, time for our reverse speed test. How fast will the Outlander go in reverse? I've left it in high power mode. Here we go. Whoa, it takes off all right. We go 52 kilometers an hour in reverse, 53, not too bad. Now let's talk about our sine wave. I'm going to bump this up to 130. Give us a little bit of speed here. So there it is there. Yeah, look, it has a bit of hang time there. The body control could be much better at the top end. It sort of stays up really high and then bounces back down. They are dealing with a lot of additional weight here in comparison to the regular Outlander. And I know some people have complained about that sine wave test and specifically doing it at 130, but I've got to tell you, if you get your head outside the city and go to the country, especially the drive that I just did, which is a major arterial between Adelaide and Melbourne, some of the roads are absolutely shocking. And if you do need to overtake a truck or something like that, you obviously are going to sink the slipper in, exceed the speed limit, probably. Not that I endorse that, it's illegal, but it's certainly a logical way to overtake. And if you do hit one of those bumps at speed, you really need the car to have enough control so that it will level itself out and not send you off the road. So that is why that test is important, and that's why we will do it with every single car to see exactly how it performs. What's road noise like? Well, you do have a little bit of tyre noise that comes into the cabin, and you will notice that on coarse chip roads. On that longer distance drive, I did have to pump the volume up a little bit because it was drowning out a lot of the noise coming out of the speakers when I was doing 110 on a coarse chip road. Now, what's visibility like? So the seating position's interesting. In the Outlander, you kind of sit closer to the ground, but I can see the edges of the bonnet there without any problems. The wing mirrors are decent enough there. You have a blind spot monitor built into those. Visibility out the back is good. It is a little compromised if you have your third row headrests up, but for the most part, that is no dramas. And then when it comes to parking, easy to maneuver in and around the city. The cameras are decent, front and rear parking sensors, the whole shebang. Now, one thing Mitsubishi hasn't fixed is the shaking bonnet. I can see it vibrating there at highway speeds, and yeah, it's not a good look and something that I think that they really need to get on top of. It just sort of must just be the air that gets underneath it or something. So time to test out the lane support systems. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to get this up to 70 k's an hour. We'll set the cruise control and then we'll test how well our lane support system works. Okay, here we go. Just drifted off to that lane. It's not sort of, it is okay. I mean, it's preventing us from leaving the lane, but it isn't one of these steering systems that will actually hold the steering wheel for you. And it's interesting, it vibrates the steering wheel and then it actually brakes and pushes you back into the lane. So Mitsubishi actually has access to tech that will do the steering and all that sort of stuff on its own, and I think that is coming to Australia. But at this stage, it is just this standard setup. I'll just test it in all three lanes as well and just make sure it works even when you do have a slightly trickier situation. Jump up to lane 3 here. Okay, so it's detecting those lines. See, for lane 3, it's only vibrating. It doesn't actually hold the car within that lane. Interesting. So there you go. If you want to see how the Outlander compares to other cars that we've tested before, have a look at the link in the description below. But this is just a lane departure warning and a lane departure prevention system. It won't actually steer the car for you when cruise control is set. So the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, I actually didn't think I was going to enjoy this as much as I have. It really just fixes all the problems the standard Outlander has. It really has all that sort of extra punch that you need. You get the green benefits of being able to drive about 80 k's just on EV power alone. And then when you do put it in the power mode, it absolutely hammers. I was so surprised at how athletic and dynamic it is. It really just completely transforms this car. So in terms of the negatives, the stuff they need to work on is probably the ride. I think that body control is just a little bit clumsy at the top end there, especially for things like overtaking in the country. And when you really want to get stuck into it, it can feel a little bit floaty at times. The third row, look, I think ultimately it's great to have a third row available, but it is just a kid-only zone back there. Outside of that, it really is so hard to fault this car. So really impressed with it. Now, if you are a Mitsubishi Outlander current generation PHEV owner, are you going to upgrade to this? Does this sort of fix all the problems that you had with your car? And do you have plans on using the V2X infrastructure that the car has on board? So let me know in the comments section below. I'm always keen for your feedback. Now, if you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like it, you share it with your mates, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon. But until next time, take it easy.